The chandelier above the Calloway estate's dining room shimmered like it wanted to expose something, every crystal flickering like it knew a secret. I watched her walk in, wearing white silk that hugged her too tightly for decency at an engagement dinner. Ivy Calloway didn't just wear white, she wore it like a dare. She brushed past the coat stand, handed her mink wrap to a silent server, and let her gaze scan the room like a queen inspecting the help. Her eyes met mine for a split second, and that's when she smirked, subtle, deliberate. I don't think anyone else saw it, but I did. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was imagining things. That was the moment I realized something wasn't right between her and Bennett, and maybe hadn't been for a long time. And yet, I still smiled. I still held his hand. I still toasted to forever with a glass of champagne I couldn't taste. That was 3 weeks before the wedding. 3 weeks before everything unraveled like a badly tied bow. But even that night, something in me knew. Sometimes, your body registers betrayal before your brain will let it admit the truth. It starts with silence in your chest, a kind of slow freeze behind the ribs. If you know that feeling, if you've ever sat at a dinner table and known that the person next to you was lying with every word they spoke, comment below. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Our community has become one of the people from all walks of life who've experienced betrayal, family drama, or quiet revenge. If this is your first time here, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe so we can keep bringing you stories just like this one. Stories of truth, strategy, and the quiet fire that lives inside the underestimated. Now, back to that night. I was Harper Ellis, 30, trauma nurse, first-generation college graduate, and the woman everyone assumed was so lucky to be marrying into the Calloways. They didn't see the way Ivy's mother, Maureen, flinched every time I mentioned my hometown, or the way Bennett introduced me as a nurse from Vermont, like it was some noble volunteer work and not my actual life. The whole room smelled like imported roses and pretension, and I could feel my own spine curling under the weight of pretending I belonged. Bennett leaned over then, brushed a curl from my cheek, and whispered, "You good, babe?" I nodded. What I didn't say was that I'd been counting how many times he looked at Ivy tonight. I stopped at 4. No, 5. When she laughed too loudly at a joke no one else heard. That was also the moment I remembered. Ivy had once told me, casually, that their family believed in keeping things within the inner circle. She had meant it about politics, probably, but that phrase came back to haunt me. And on that night, while people clinked their glasses and made toasts and said I was such a perfect match for the Calloway name, I quietly tucked away my first doubt, a tiny crack in what I thought was a solid life. I didn't know then that the crack wasn't small at all. It was the beginning of a sinkhole. I used to think that betrayal would come like thunder, loud, undeniable, the kind of thing you couldn't ignore even if you tried. But when it finally arrived, it didn't roar, it whispered. The moment it happened started with a simple ping on my phone during a night shift. I was charting vitals at 2:13 a.m. under sterile lights in the trauma ward when Bennett's name lit up my screen. It was a forwarded message from his sister Ivy. At least, that's what it looked like at first. But when I tapped it open, my breath caught. It was a screenshot, a cropped photo of a woman's hand, her red nails unmistakable, resting on a man's thigh. in what looked like a luxury suite's balcony chair. Bennett's watch was in the shot. So was Ivy's smile in the reflection of the wine glass. The caption underneath, in Ivy's voice, read, 3 a.m. Truths hit different when they stay in the family. I stared at that screen until the fluorescent lights started to flicker. I told myself maybe it was a joke. Maybe Ivy was messing with me. She always had a twisted sense of humor. Maybe it was old. But then the timestamp. Just 3 months ago. The same weekend Bennett told me his phone had died during his parents' anniversary cruise in the Mediterranean. That weekend, he came back, tanned, tired, and unusually quiet. I had brushed it off. Until now. That morning, I didn't sleep. I took a shower, drove back to my apartment in silence, and waited for Bennett to come over, like he always did on Wednesdays. When he walked in, smiling, holding 2 iced lattes, and humming something off-key, I thought, this is the face of someone who believes they've gotten away with it. I let him talk about paint samples for our bedroom walls, while my stomach turned to stone. Then I showed him the screenshot. His face went pale, but not with guilt, with calculation. His jaw locked. His voice dropped. "Where'd you get this?" he asked like I'd stolen state secrets. "Is it true?" I asked back, barely able to hear myself. There was a beat of silence. Then he sat down, his voice soft. "Look, it was complicated. We'd both had too much wine. It was a mistake, Harper. One mistake. You weren't even there. As if my absence was the crime. As if I should have been there to stop it." I couldn't speak. My chest felt too tight. Then came the real blow. He stood up, paced, and added, "If this gets out, my mother will explode. The board will lose faith in me. It'll ruin everyone. You're smarter than that, right?" I thought I was being accused of betrayal, when I was the one betrayed. Ivy called me that night. She didn't even try to deny it. Her voice was like chilled syrup over the phone. "You and I both know this marriage isn't really about love, Harper. It's about access. And you've done well for yourself. Don't throw it away because of one complicated night. I care about my brother. I always have. He needs someone like you. Reliable, acceptable." That word, acceptable, landed like glass in my mouth. "Why would you send that photo?" I asked. "Because you deserve to walk into this with open eyes. If you stay, at least don't pretend you didn't know." Then she hung up. I didn't eat for 2 days. I told everyone I had food poisoning. I canceled my bachelorette brunch. I stared at the bridal shower gifts piling up in my foyer and felt like I was living in someone else's body. There was a part of me, cold and numb, that considered leaving everything. But where would I go? The wedding was weeks away. Vendors were booked. Our names were etched into champagne flutes and engraved onto linen napkins. My mother had already mailed hand-addressed invitations to every friend she'd ever taught with. Leaving would be an earthquake, but staying would be a slow erosion. Then Maureen invited me to lunch. She chose a high-rise rooftop bistro overlooking downtown Boston. Everything about the place screamed curated power. She didn't mince words. "Ivy told me you're upset." I said nothing. She sipped her tea. "We all make mistakes, Harper. Some stay in the family. Some ruin families." She looked me dead in the eye. "You're a smart girl. I know you won't blow this up over a fleeting lapse in judgment. Bennett loves you. He's just not perfect." "Neither am I said, swallowing my nausea. "But I never slept with his sister." She blinked once, then leaned forward. You walk away now. You'll embarrass yourself and your family. You'll never be taken seriously again. But if you walk down that aisle with grace, you'll have a name, wealth, a platform. No one has to know a thing. It wasn't a threat. It was an offer. A deal between two women who both knew how easily people discard women who make noise. That night, I sat in my car outside my childhood home for almost an hour. The porch light was still broken. A rusty wind chime squeaked in the dark. My dad had left out the same porch chair I used to curl up in during summer storms. I finally got out and walked inside. The smell of old books and wood glue hit me like a memory. My dad was asleep in the recliner, a copy of Walden resting on his chest, his oxygen machine puffing quietly. I stood there and thought, this is where I'm from. This is who I am. I'm not from chandeliers and closed-door threats. I'm from patched jeans and library cards. I watched my dad stir and mumble my name. You okay, kiddo? He asked without opening his eyes. I didn't answer. I just sat next to him on the floor, my head on the edge of his armrest, and let the tears fall. Quietly. No sound, just breath and grief. But somewhere inside me, something began to shift. A low heat, a flicker, like someone had lit a candle in the ruins. If this was how they played their game, I was going to play it better. They thought I'd take their scraps and stay silent. But I was raised on honesty and firewood. I could survive the cold, and I was about to make sure they never forgot it. I didn't tell anyone the wedding was off because it wasn't. Not yet. At least, not in the way they expected. There's something almost medicinal about driving home at 4 a.m. with your whole world on fire and no one knowing but you. I stopped at the 24-hour diner in my hometown and ordered coffee so burnt it could melt a spoon. I sat in the corner booth under the buzzing neon light and stared out at the empty parking lot while the waitress called me sweetheart and didn't ask questions. That's when the idea came to me. If they wanted a picture-perfect wedding, I would give them one, down to the napkins and cake. But the ending, that was mine to write. By sunrise, I was in my childhood bedroom, unpacking a box marked college stuff. At the bottom, under old syllabi and a faded pair of sneakers, I found what I was looking for. An old pocket digital recorder from my undergrad journalism class. It was dusty, but intact. I charged it. It blinked red. Still worked. Step 1. I needed someone who knew how to extract deleted messages, metadata, timestamps, someone who didn't ask why. And I knew exactly who that was. Elijah Monroe. He used to sit behind me in homeroom chewing the tips of his pencils and fixing broken calculators for fun. Now, he ran a computer repair shop out of his uncle's old gas station. The sign outside said, Monroe Tech, we fix the past. Fitting. When I walked in, he looked up from behind the counter with a look that said, why does a girl in a cashmere coat from Beacon Hill look like she just walked out of a war zone? Then he said, Harper Ellis, I'll be damned. What brings you back? I didn't sugarcoat it. I pulled Bennett's old backup phone from my bag. He'd given it to me months ago when he upgraded. Told me to use it as a backup for wedding planning. I handed it to Elijah. I need everything off this. Every deleted message, call log, audio memo, location ping. He blinked. This about your fiancé? It's about my freedom, I said. You in? He nodded slowly. For you, always. The next few days passed like a montage you'd see in a courtroom thriller. I stayed in the back room of my dad's house, rewriting my vows, not the ones they expected, but the ones I needed. I memorized what I would say, word for word, truth for truth. I rehearsed it like scripture. Elijah worked late into the night and texted me updates. Found 19 deleted voice memos. Some have Ivy's number. Extracting audio. This one's long. Might be a call recording. Harper, you're gonna want to hear this. The clip started innocently. Bennett's voice, smooth, careless. She's useful. Keeps my image clean. She's from the right kind of poor. Admirable, not embarrassing. Then Ivy chimed in. You'll be CEO by 30 if you marry her. Maureen's already lined up the donors. She'll never know. She trusts you too much. Then laughter. Then the line that changed everything. Let her walk down the aisle. Let her have her moment. Then we'll do what we've always done. Keep it in the family. I felt sick, but not surprised. That's what betrayal does after a while. It stops shocking you. It just confirms what you already suspected. I copied the audio files onto a second recorder. Elijah helped me encrypt them and store them in the cloud. I printed photos, receipts, even a hotel reservation with both their names on it. I created a private folder titled Exit Strategy. Inside, I placed everything I needed to destroy them. If not emotionally, then socially, professionally, legally. But I wasn't reckless. That's what Ivy would expect. That's how Maureen would paint me. Bitter, unstable, jealous. I had to be better than that. I had to be precise. So I called the wedding planner, Margaret, and confirmed all final arrangements. I praised the flower choices. I approved the menu. I even upgraded the videographer to include drone coverage. Why not let the fall of House Calloway be documented in 4K? Meanwhile, Elijah stayed quiet, never asked what I planned to do with the data. He just looked at me one night under the flickering gas station light and said, "You're not who you used to be." "No," I replied. "I'm who I had to become." "Good," he said. "They won't see you coming." Then he handed me a burner phone. "Use this if you ever need to send it all with one click." I nodded. "One click," I repeated. One evening, while sitting on the back porch with my dad, he asked me why I looked so calm. I said, "Because the storm's behind me now." He looked at me, proud but wary. "You sure you want to go through with this wedding, kid?" I smiled. Not the wedding they think I'm going through with. That night, I lit a candle on my nightstand and read my new vows out loud to myself for the first time. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just whispered each line like a promise to the woman I used to be. The woman they tried to bury under designer dresses, fake smiles, and hand-me-down lies. I wasn't just going to survive them. I was going to leave them speechless. There's a moment in every plan where the floor shifts, where you realize the game is still being played on multiple boards, and you're not the only one holding pieces. That moment came for me 2 weeks before the wedding, wrapped in a cream-colored envelope with my name written in calligraphy. The Calloway family crest was pressed into the wax seal. It arrived by courier, not mail. Maureen's subtle way of saying, "We do things differently here." Inside was a revised prenup and a brief note in her looping cursive. "Let's be smart, dear. Legal protection benefits us all." The document was 28 pages long. On the surface, it looked standard. Property rights, business assets, confidentiality clauses. But buried on page 17 was the clause that made my skin crawl. In the event of separation, The non-Calloway party forfeits all rights to assets accrued during the marriage, including, but not limited to equity, shared holdings, and inheritance or marital benefits tied to the Calloway family estate. In plain English, if I walked away, even with good reason, I walked away with nothing. The timing was no coincidence. They thought I'd be too emotionally invested to back out now. They thought they could dangle luxury in front of a girl who came from secondhand furniture and student loan debt. They didn't realize that growing up broke teaches you to read every word of what rich people hand you. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I invited Maureen to meet me for tea at a boutique cafe, halfway between Beacon Hill and my dad's house. Neutral territory. She arrived in tailored beige, smiling like she didn't just try to legally erase me. "You look tired, dear," she said sweetly. "Are you sleeping?" I stirred my tea slowly. "Are you always this worried about your son's brides?" Her smile didn't flinch. "Only the ones who matter." I pulled out the prenup and slid it across the table. "You think I don't know what this is? It's a muzzle. You want to make sure that if he hurts me again, I leave quietly, with my mouth shut and my hands empty." Maureen's expression shifted, just a twitch. But I caught it. "It's standard protocol for families of our stature," she said coolly. "Sure," I said, "but let's be honest. This isn't about protection. It's about preservation. You want me to disappear without causing a mess. I understand." I folded the document and stood. But here's the thing. I don't do quiet anymore. Back at my dad's house, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I didn't look like a bride. I looked like someone preparing for battle. The kind of calm that comes after the crying ends. The kind of woman they weren't ready for. But just when I thought I'd anticipated every move, Elijah showed up at my door holding his phone. His face was tight, guarded. "We need to talk." He played a recording. It was recent. Bennett on a call with someone unnamed. She's acting weird again, quiet, thoughtful. It's like she's planning something. Ivy says I should watch her, keep her close. You don't think she knows, do you? A pause. Then, "If this gets out before the merger, I'm screwed. I'll lose everything." The voice on the other end mumbled something. Bennett replied, "We may need to consider a contingency." Then the call ended. Contingency. A word that made my blood run cold. I suddenly understood. I wasn't just dealing with cheaters. I was dealing with people who treated this wedding like a business transaction with risks. I had become a variable, and variables get neutralized. The next few days were a blur. Ivy called pretending to check in. Her tone was syrupy sweet, but the words were laced with malice. "I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed. Cold feet are common, especially for people marrying up." She paused. "But I'm glad you're sticking it out. You're so resilient." I didn't respond. She continued, "Just remember, whatever happens, happens in front of everyone, and everyone remembers everything." Then she laughed. I hung up. That night, I took a pair of scissors to the bridal magazine Maureen had gifted me. I clipped out every lie. Smiling photos of picture-perfect families, honeymoon spreads, articles about how to be the perfect daughter-in-law. I glued them onto the inside of a manila folder and labeled it, "Version They Wanted." Then I took a photo of the prenup and labeled it, "Version I Refused." I posted nothing publicly, but I saved everything. Elijah grew quiet too. I caught him watching me from the porch one evening as I lit a candle on the railing. "You ever scared?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. I just stared at the flame. You're playing with fire, Harper. What if they come after you harder? I looked at him, steady. Then I'll burn first and light the way. But the cracks started to show. I began to get migraines. My hands shook when I wrote. I avoided calls from well-meaning friends who just wanted to talk about dresses and centerpieces. At the final venue walkthrough, I almost lost it when Margaret, the planner, said, "Isn't this everything you ever dreamed of?" I looked around the rose garden, the altar, the string quartet rehearsing nearby, and thought, no, none of this is mine. This is their dream, their lie. But I smiled. I smiled so wide it hurt. Because in 12 days, I wasn't going to be the one lying anymore. I was going to be the one telling the truth, with evidence, precision, and no remorse. Let them underestimate me. Let them sharpen their knives. I had already set the table. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in fog. Not metaphorically, literally. A dense mist blanketed the Calloway estate's manicured gardens, dulling the world in gray. It felt poetic, like even the sky didn't believe this was a day for celebration. Inside the bridal suite, Margaret buzzed around like a caffeinated bee, fluffing my veil, rearranging perfume bottles, clapping her hands at the bridesmaids. "We're almost there, darling," she said, with a smile so polished it squeaked. "Just breathe." But I wasn't nervous. My heart was steady. My hands were still, because today wasn't about love. It was about reckoning. Jacqueline, my best friend since college, zipped up my dress, her fingers trembling more than mine. "You look like revenge dipped in silk," she whispered, trying to laugh, but her eyes glistened. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said, adjusting the small thumb drive recorder sewn inside the bodice of my gown. It was programmed to play wirelessly through the altar mic. Elijah had helped me rig the trigger from my bouquet ribbon. One press, that's all it would take. By 4 p.m., the Calloway estate was crawling with socialites, trustees, journalists pretending to be family friends, and alumni donors from every Northeastern Ivy League imaginable. The air smelled like roses and generational wealth. Ivy floated past in a cream-sheath dress, tight, backless, stunning, and just shy of white. The message was clear. This could have been me. Bennett stood at the altar in a custom black tux, hair perfectly tousled, his expression a performance of joyful nerves. When our eyes met, I wondered what he saw. His bride, his golden ticket, or something far more dangerous. The ceremony began like any other. The string quartet played Vivaldi. My bridesmaids glided down the aisle in blush satin. Guests whispered as I appeared at the end of the stone pathway, my veil long and sheer, my father steadying my arm. "You okay, Harper?" he asked softly. I smiled. "I'm ready." And I was. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked straight ahead, straight at the man who'd lied with every vow he planned to speak. We reached the altar. Pastor Langley began with warmth and grace, speaking about commitment and truth and family. I listened politely, waiting for the part that was mine. When the time came, he turned to Bennett. "You may now share your vows." Bennett cleared his throat and pulled a folded page from his jacket. "Harper," he began, "you are the calm in my chaos, the kindness in my ambition. I didn't know what love meant until you showed me, every day with your quiet strength. I promise to honor you, protect you, and never take your love for granted." The guest sighed. My aunt dabbed her eyes. Ivy smiled like she already knew the next chapter. When it was my turn, Pastor Langley said gently, "Harper, your vows?" I reached for my bouquet. My fingers found the thin switch beneath the ribbon wrap. I pressed it. There was a beat of silence, followed by the sudden click and hum of a live recording piped through the outdoor speakers. Then Bennett's voice, crystal clear, filled the garden. "She's from the right kind of poor, admirable, not embarrassing." Gasps, murmurs. I could feel Bennett freeze next to me. "She'll never know. She trusts you too much." I looked at him slowly. "Let her walk down the aisle. Let her have her moment. Then we'll do what we've always done. Keep it in the family." There it was, the line that murdered silence. The audience erupted, not with applause, with horror. Maureen turned to stone. Ivy's face drained of color. Bennett lunged for the mic, voice rising. "This is fake. It's edited. It's out of context." But no one believed him. Not after what they'd heard. I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." The garden went still. I pulled a page from the same bodice pocket and unfolded my real vows. My voice didn't shake, not once. "Bennett Calloway, I was prepared to love you. I was ready to fight for you. I stood by you even after the first red flags, after the late meetings, the cold silences, the carefully chosen lies. But I won't marry a man who sees me as a stepping stone. I won't marry into a family who treats loyalty as currency and betrayal as inheritance." I looked directly at Ivy. "You once told me keeping things in the family was a tradition. I didn't realize how literally you meant it. You can have your traditions. I choose truth." Then I turned to the guests. "I'm sorry if this moment isn't what you expected. But I believe every woman deserves to know what kind of man waits at the end of the aisle. And today, you all saw him clearly." I removed my veil, my earrings, my ring. I placed them neatly on the altar and stepped down without a tremble. Behind me, someone stood up and clapped, then another, and another. Not everyone stayed seated. Some left in stunned silence. Others whispered apologies as I walked past. Ivy stood frozen, her mouth parted but voiceless. Maureen didn't move. Bennett followed me. "Harper, wait, please. We can fix this. We can still—" I turned, calm as snowfall. "You don't fix rot, Bennett. You cut it out." Then I kept walking. Inside the manor, the reception hall sat untouched. Tables sparkling, food steaming, champagne ready. I grabbed the mic on the DJ stand. "The wedding is off," I announced, "but the party isn't. I paid for this, and I'm not wasting good crab cakes. If you came to celebrate love, stay. If you came to see a train wreck, congratulations. We're past the climax. Laughter, real laughter, light, unburdened." I danced with my dad. I toasted with Jacqueline. I hugged Elijah, who had arrived late and stood in the back with his arms crossed, grinning like the proudest co-conspirator in town. Bennett never reappeared. Neither did Ivy. But as I looked around that room full of people who saw me not as a bride, but as a woman who refused to be broken, I felt something I hadn't in months: light. That night, I walked barefoot through the garden, holding my heels in one hand and a champagne flute in the other. I reached the altar again, now empty under fairy lights. I stood where I'd spoken my truth, and I whispered, "This was my real wedding day, the day I married myself to the truth." to power, to peace. The morning after the wedding, that wasn't, the Boston social pages read like a crime scene report. Calloway heir publicly shamed at wedding. Scandal at the altar. Vows turn into expose. Bride mic drops truth, walks out alone. There were blurry photos of me mid-speech, my veil tossed aside. Bennett's face a tight mask of panic. But what mattered more than the headlines were the consequences behind the scenes. Because what happened in that garden wasn't just a spectacle, it was a detonation. And the aftershocks were immediate. The Calloway board met in emergency session by Monday morning. The merger Bennett had pinned his future on was pulled. Investors cited ethics concerns and reputational risks. Suddenly, the charming heir apparent looked less like a visionary and more like a liability. One board member was quoted anonymously as saying, "If this is how he manages personal alliances, how will he treat professional ones?" Within a week, Bennett was quietly removed from the CEO succession plan. They didn't fire him, they just made him irrelevant. Which, for a man like Bennett, was worse. Ivy tried to do damage control, of course. She gave a thinly veiled interview to a local magazine where she called the incident a deeply personal misunderstanding exploited for attention. But her voice cracked halfway through, and when readers flooded the comments calling her Gaslight Barbie, the magazine pulled the piece altogether. 2 days later, she was seen moving out of her downtown loft in the pouring rain. No one helped her carry the boxes. As for Maureen, she went quiet. Not publicly. No, she was still attending luncheons, still showing face. But her once tight circle had thinned. You could see it in the way she sat alone at board meetings, the way hosts stopped seating her at the center table, the way other socialites smiled just a little too sweetly. She'd spent a lifetime building a name too pristine to question. Now that name was covered in whispers. Even when she tried to deflect, claiming I had overreacted or that it was all private family drama, the recordings made that impossible. No one wanted to defend a woman who helped orchestrate her son's betrayal, then tried to silence his victim with a prenup. But maybe the most unexpected consequence was what happened in my inbox. A week after the video of my altar speech went viral, thanks to someone in the audience who'd caught it all on their phone, my email filled with messages, women from all over the country, some anonymous, some signed with initials, some pouring out their full stories of betrayal, control, emotional manipulation. One message read, "I was engaged to a man just like Bennett, but I didn't walk away. Watching you gave me the courage to leave before it cost me more." Another simply said, "You saved me years of pain. Thank you." And then there was one that stopped me cold. It came from an email address I didn't recognize, but the name signed at the bottom was familiar. Lauren T., Bennett's ex-fiancé. Her message was short. "He did this to me too. Not with Ivy, but with someone close. I found out, but I was too afraid to walk away. Too deep in. I admire you. I hope you know how rare that kind of strength is. You didn't just protect yourself. You gave others permission to protect themselves too." I sat with that email for a long time. Not because it shocked me, but because it confirmed something I'd begun to suspect. My pain wasn't unique, and neither was my decision. I'd just been loud enough for people to hear it. Meanwhile, Elijah and I kept things quiet. He never asked for credit. He never gloated. But he showed up at my dad's house every few days with groceries or coffee or the occasional "just checking excuse. He didn't treat me like a tragic figure or a hero, just like Harper. And that was enough. One evening, we sat on the back porch, watching a thunderstorm roll in over the hills. He nudged me with his elbow and said, "So, what happens next?" I smiled, warm but tired. "Next, I live." He nodded, like that made perfect sense. But before that, I wrote one last message, just for me. I typed it into a draft and saved it, not intending to send it. It read, "To the girl who believed in the dress, the promises, the Calloway name, you didn't fail. You woke up, and waking up hurt like hell. But it also saved you. Keep walking. There's more to build, more to become. You're not someone's almost wife. You're your own damn foundation." Then I hit save and closed the laptop. Because the truth was, the real ceremony didn't happen in the garden. It was happening now. In quiet days, small steps, clean starts. The kind of wedding no one films, but the one that actually lasts. It took 6 months before the dust truly settled. 6 months of quiet mornings and slow breathing, of detoxing from drama, from glass walls and curated smiles. I traded rose petals for soil and spreadsheets for garden beds. I moved back to the edge of town into a modest cottage with peeling paint and wild ivy growing along the fence. My dad helped me fix it up on weekends, between oxygen breaks and storytelling sessions about his carpentry days when nails cost pennies and love cost nothing. The first thing I did was clear out the shed in the backyard and turn it into a tiny greenhouse. I planted lavender, thyme, tomatoes, and wildflowers. My dad joked that I was growing a forest of stubborn hope. I told him that's exactly what I needed. A new beginning rooted in something real. That spring, I opened a cafe in town. I called it The Vow. Not because of the wedding that never happened, but because of the one that did. The vow I made to myself under fairy lights and trembling stars, to never shrink again, to never silence myself for someone else's comfort, to love deeply, yes, but never blindly, to choose myself first. The cafe was simple: handwritten menus, reclaimed furniture, a rotating wall of customer-pinned notes that read things like, "Today, I said no and meant it," or "He left and I'm still breathing." People came not just for the coffee, but for the quiet, the honesty, the reminder that every story deserves an ending you choose for yourself. One afternoon in July, a little girl wandered into the cafe clutching a flower. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her mother was ordering at the counter, and the girl shyly held the flower out to me. "My mommy says you saved people," she whispered. I crouched down and took the flower gently. "Tell your mommy she saved herself," I said, "but I'm glad I got to help." Later that night, after closing, I sat in the garden behind the cafe with Elijah. He'd stayed. Not as a rescuer, not as a romantic promise, but as someone who saw the real me long before the wedding ever existed. We hadn't labeled anything. We didn't need to. Sometimes he brought his laptop and worked next to me while I watered herbs. Sometimes he just brought silence, which I'd come to treasure more than most things. "You know," he said, staring up at the stars, "I think that whole mess was a strange kind of gift." I tilted my head. "How so?" "Because they underestimated the wrong girl. And now a lot of other people know exactly what strength looks like." I didn't respond right away. I was watching the breeze move through the sunflowers. I used to think strength looked like holding everything together, keeping quiet, being polite even when it hurts. But now, I think real strength is choosing to tear it all down when you know it's wrong and daring to start again with nothing but your own hands. I looked at them, my hands. No diamond ring, no scars that showed, just skin, soil, and truth. The recording from the wedding still sat in my safe. I hadn't played it since that day, but I kept it. Not for revenge, not even for proof. Just as a reminder that the version of me who stood up there, bride and truth teller, strategist, and survivor, she was still inside me. She always would be. Sometimes people from the city stopped by the cafe. A few recognized me, most didn't. I never corrected them. I liked the anonymity, the stillness. I liked that here. I wasn't Harper Ellis, the girl who humiliated Boston's golden son at the altar. I was just Harper, the woman who made good coffee, grew stubborn hope, and believed in second chances, especially her own. Every once in a while, I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection in the cafe window as I wiped down the counter, and I'd smile. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, it was real. My life was mine again, and that, I realized, was the best vow I ever kept.